My mother-in-law tried to poison my marriage for years. On her deathbed, she whispered, "I did it to save you from what your husband really is." That's what I told people. That's what I believed. For 10 years, I sat across from that woman at holiday dinners and birthday celebrations and Sunday lunches, and I smiled the way you smile when you're holding something back, and I hated her. Quietly, completely, the way you can only hate someone who has made your life smaller every single day for a decade. She questioned every decision I made. She whispered things to her son that I was never meant to hear, but always did. She looked at me. God, the way she looked at me, like I was something temporary, like I was a problem she was waiting to outlast. And then she was dying, and I sat next to her bed in that hospital room, holding the hand of a woman I had resented for 10 years, because she was my husband's mother, and because that is what you do. And she looked at me with eyes that were already going somewhere far away, and she used the last real breath she had, and she said, "I wasn't trying to ruin you. I was trying to save you from a monster." She died 4 hours later. That night, I went home. My husband was out. And something she had said, something from years ago that I had dismissed, that I had buried, pulled me to the floor of our bedroom, to a corner I had never paid attention to a loose board I had never noticed. And underneath it was a safe, and inside the safe was a folder. And inside the folder were photographs and news clippings about women who had gone missing, women who were never found. Women with dark hair and light eyes and oval faces. Women who looked exactly like me. And I was on the floor of my bedroom with my blood turning to ice inside my body, and I heard the front door open, and then I heard his footsteps, and then I heard his voice, calm and low and completely familiar, directly behind me. Mom always did talk too much. My name is Rebecca Harmon, and I need you to stay with me. Every second of what I'm about to tell you matters. Don't go anywhere. And before I go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me where in the world you're watching this from. I want to know who is in the room with me tonight. Go ahead, I'm not going anywhere. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, middle child of 3. My older brother, Marcus, was the responsible one, my younger sister, Dana, was the funny one, and I was somewhere in between, the quiet one, maybe, the one who noticed things, the one who sat at the edge of family gatherings and watched the dynamics play out like a film she'd already seen but couldn't stop watching. My parents had a good marriage. I want to say that because it matters. I grew up watching 2 people who genuinely liked each other, who laughed at the same things, who disagreed without cruelty, who held hands in the car without thinking about it. My frame of reference for what love looked like was healthy, or at least I thought it was. I studied psychology at the University of Tennessee, not because I had grand plans to be a therapist, but because people fascinated me. The way they moved through the world, the way they presented one face and hid another, the gap between who someone appears to be and who they actually are. I graduated at 23. Got a job as a behavioral research coordinator at a nonprofit in Knoxville, and was living a quiet, ordinary, genuinely contented life when I met Warren Harmon at a fundraising event on a Thursday evening in October. He was 34, I was 24. He was in real estate development. Not the flashy kind he was always careful to say, not the kind that knocks down neighborhoods, the kind that restores them. Historic buildings, adaptive reuse, preservation projects. He had an easy intelligence about him, the kind that never needed to announce itself. He listened when you talked. He remembered things, small things. He remembered I mentioned liking jasmine tea on our first date, and on our third date, he had a box of it on the table when I arrived. People, when I've told them this story, always ask, were there signs? Were there red flags? And the honest answer is, not the ones you're thinking of. He was never violent, never explosive, never obviously controlling. He was warm, attentive, considerate. He was the man your friends meet and then spend the drive home saying, "Rebecca, he is so wonderful, you have to hold on to this one." The red flags I missed were not red at all. They were the palest, most translucent pink, the kind you only see when you hold them up to the light. And by the time I learned to look for them that way, I was already inside a life I didn't fully recognize. I met his mother-in-law, Eleanor Harmon, 6 weeks after Warren and I started dating. She lived alone in a large Victorian house in Chattanooga, about an hour and a half from us. Warren's father had passed away when Warren was 19, a heart attack, sudden, and Eleanor had lived alone in that house for 15 years by the time I met her. She had never remarried, never, as far as I could tell, even dated. She kept the house immaculate, every surface clean, every cushion straight, every photograph on the mantelpieces arranged with a precision that felt like effort, like a performance, the kind of house that makes you afraid to set your glass down. She shook my hand when we met, not warmly, firmly, and she looked at me like a doctor looks at an X-ray, searching for something specific, something she expected to find. Over dinner that first night, she asked me 14 questions. I counted because I had the kind of brain that counted things like that. Where I grew up, what my parents did, whether I had ever lived alone, what I thought about commitment, about family, about a woman's role inside a marriage. The last one she phrased carefully, not offensively, not overtly, but it was there, underneath the linen and the good china. I answered everything honestly. I thought it was a good sign. I thought, she takes her son's relationships seriously. She wants to know who I am. That's healthy. I was wrong about what she was doing, but I wasn't wrong that she was doing it carefully. On the drive home, Warren laughed and squeezed my hand and said, "She liked you. Trust me. You can always tell." I believed him. I should not have believed him. Warren and I got engaged 18 months after we met. He proposed in the garden of that same Victorian house in Chattanooga on a Sunday afternoon while Eleanor was inside making lemonade, so we thought. She was watching from the kitchen window. I found that out later. She told me herself, years later, one of the strange things she said that I filed away without understanding. We got married 11 months after the engagement, 120 guests, a restored venue in downtown Knoxville, October again because I have always loved October. I wore my grandmother's veil and carried white gardenias and cried twice, once at the altar and once in the bathroom, privately, from a kind of happiness so large I didn't know what else to do with it. Eleanor sat in the front row in a navy dress and watched the ceremony with an expression I could not name then. I can name it now. I have had years to understand it. It was not happiness. It was not grief. It was something closer to dread, the particular expression of someone watching something they cannot stop. I thought she was sad about her son growing up, about change, about the natural, ordinary grief of a mother releasing her child into someone else's keeping. I thought I was being empathetic and generous by not taking it personally. I was being naive, because the first shot was fired at our wedding reception, not loudly, quietly, the way Eleanor did everything. She pulled me aside near the end of the evening, near the back of the hall, when the dance floor was full and the music was loud, and she held my hands in both of hers, which she had never done before, not once, and she looked at me with those careful gray eyes, and she said, with the unmistakable note of urgency in her voice, "Rebecca, you can still leave." Not, "Congratulations," not, "Welcome to the family," not, "I'm so glad my son found you." You can still leave. I laughed. I thought it was a joke, a dark mother-in-law joke, the kind of thing someone says when they're nervous and the champagne has made them strange. I pulled my hands gently free and said, "Eleanor, I love him. There's nowhere I'd rather be." She looked at me for a moment longer than was comfortable, and then she smiled, small, practiced, sad, and said, I know you do." And she walked back to her table, and I walked back to the dance floor, and I did not think about it again for years.
What followed was 10 years of what I can only describe from where I stood at the time as a sustained campaign to dismantle my marriage. Eleanor called Warren every single day. Every single day. Minimum one call, often two. Long calls, 40 minutes, an hour sometimes. When I asked Warren what they talked about, he would say, "Oh, mom stuff. She gets lonely." She visited 6 times a year, sometimes more. She had her own key to our house. Warren had given it to her before we were married, and I had never felt I could ask for it back without starting a war. During visits, she moved through our home with a familiarity that made me feel like the guest. She made comments, constant, precise, perfectly deniable, about the way I cooked, about the way I kept the house, about the way I dressed, about my job, which I had kept, I was a research director by then, and which she described consistently as Rebecca's little career. Sound familiar?
She questioned my decisions as a wife, subtle questions. Has Rebecca always been this independent, Warren? I only ask because your father always said, and then something about what a marriage needed, what a woman's role was, what she had given up to be a good wife, and what that had meant to the family. She undermined me in front of our friends, gently, with that smile, the kind of comments that, if you called them out, would make you look paranoid and oversensitive. Rebecca, you're so brave to wear that. Rebecca, it's so nice that Warren lets you make that decision. Rebecca, I do worry about you sometimes. I went to Warren. Over and over, for years, I went to Warren. And Warren, intelligent, warm, attentive Warren, would listen and nod and say, "She doesn't mean it the way it sounds. She's just protective. She's from a different generation. She loves you in her way." And because I loved him, I tried to believe it. The trying exhausted me. Year after year, it exhausted me. I started dreading the phone calls, the visits, the holidays. I started building a kind of internal armor that I carried everywhere, even when Eleanor wasn't present, because you never knew when something would require it. My sister Dana came to visit one February and watched me navigate a phone call with Eleanor from across the kitchen, and afterwards said, "Becca, that woman is not okay, and I don't think Warren sees it." I said, "He loves her. She's his mother." "I know, but do you see what you just did on that phone call? You apologized 4 times. For nothing. For existing." I hadn't noticed. That was the part that scared me. I had stopped noticing. Here is where I have to slow down and tell you something I was not able to see clearly until much later, until I had distance and silence, and a therapist named Dr. Patricia Owens, who asked me questions for 6 months until I was ready to answer them honestly. While I was focused on Eleanor, while all of my attention and energy and emotional resources were being consumed by the friction of that relationship, I was not watching my husband. Not closely, not the way I would have watched him if I hadn't been so busy surviving his mother. And Warren, I understand now, understood that perfectly. The calls he got that I wasn't part of, the trips he took for work. Real estate development requires travel, of course it does. No one questions that. The weekends away, the late nights that extended later as the years went on. The way he sometimes looked at me, not with love, with something else. Assessment, calculation, the kind of look that, in a business context, you might call measuring. There were financial things I didn't understand and stopped asking about, because every time I asked, the conversation became complicated in a way that made me feel stupid, and I had learned that feeling stupid around Warren led to apologizing, and I was tired of apologizing. There were women. I should say alleged, but I won't because I know what I know. There were women. Warren was handsome, charming, professionally successful, socially skilled. He moved through rooms the way certain men do when they have learned exactly how to be what a room wants them to be. But here is the thing. Here is the thing that Dr. Patricia Owens helped me understand in that quiet office over 6 months of careful, patient questions. While I was focused on Eleanor, while all of my attention and energy and emotional resources were being consumed by the friction of that relationship, I was not watching my husband. Not closely. Not the way I would have watched him if I hadn't been so busy surviving his mother. And Warren, I understand now, understood that perfectly. The calls he got that I wasn't part of, the trips he took for work. Real estate development requires travel, of course it does. No one questions that. The weekends away, the late nights that extended later as the years went on. The way he sometimes looked at me, not with love, with something else. Assessment, calculation, the kind of look that, in a business context, you might call measuring. There were financial things I didn't understand and stopped asking about, because every time I asked, the conversation became complicated in a way that made me feel stupid, and I had learned that feeling stupid around Warren led to apologizing, and I was tired of apologizing. There were women. I should say alleged, but I won't because I know what I know. There were women. Warren was handsome, charming, professionally successful, socially skilled. He moved through rooms the way certain men do when they have learned exactly how to be what a room wants them to be. But here is the thing. Here is the thing that Dr. Patricia Owens helped me understand in that quiet office over 6 months of careful, patient questions. While I was focused on Eleanor, while all of my attention and energy and emotional resources were being consumed by the friction of that relationship, I was not watching my husband. Not closely. Not the way I would have watched him if I hadn't been so busy surviving his mother. And Warren, I understand now, understood that perfectly. The calls he got that I wasn't part of, the trips he took for work. Real estate development requires travel, of course it does. No one questions that. The weekends away, the late nights that extended later as the years went on. The way he sometimes looked at me, not with love, with something else. Assessment, calculation, the kind of look that, in a business context, you might call measuring. There were financial things I didn't understand and stopped asking about, because every time I asked, the conversation became complicated in a way that made me feel stupid, and I had learned that feeling stupid around Warren led to apologizing, and I was tired of apologizing. There were women. I should say alleged, but I won't because I know what I know. There were women. Warren was handsome, charming, professionally successful, socially skilled. He moved through rooms the way certain men do when they have learned exactly how to be what a room wants them to be. But here is the thing. Here is the thing that Dr. Patricia Owens helped me understand in that quiet office over 6 months of careful, patient questions. While I was focused on Eleanor, while all of my attention and energy and emotional resources were being consumed by the friction of that relationship, I was not watching my husband. Not closely. Not the way I would have watched him if I hadn't been so busy surviving his mother. And Warren, I understand now, understood that perfectly. The calls he got that I wasn't part of, the trips he took for work. Real estate development requires travel, of course it does. No one questions that. The weekends away, the late nights that extended later as the years went on. The way he sometimes looked at me, not with love, with something else. Assessment, calculation, the kind of look that, in a business context, you might call measuring. There were financial things I didn't understand and stopped asking about, because every time I asked, the conversation became complicated in a way that made me feel stupid, and I had learned that feeling stupid around Warren led to apologizing, and I was tired of apologizing. There were women. I should say alleged, but I won't because I know what I know. There were women. Warren was handsome, charming, professionally successful, socially skilled. He moved through rooms the way certain men do when they have learned exactly how to be what a room wants them to be. But here is the thing. Here is the thing that Dr. Patricia Owens helped me understand in that quiet office over 6 months of careful, patient questions. While I was focused on Eleanor, while all of my attention and energy and emotional resources were being consumed by the friction of that relationship, I was not watching my husband. Not closely. Not the way I would have watched him if I hadn't been so busy surviving his mother. And Warren, I understand now, understood that perfectly. The calls he got that I wasn't part of, the trips he took for work. Real estate development requires travel, of course it does. No one questions that. The weekends away, the late nights that extended later as the years went on. The way he sometimes looked at me, not with love, with something else. Assessment, calculation, the kind of look that, in a business context, you might call measuring. There were financial things I didn't understand and stopped asking about, because every time I asked, the conversation became complicated in a way that made me feel stupid, and I had learned that feeling stupid around Warren led to apologizing, and I was tired of apologizing. There were women. I should say alleged, but I won't because I know what I know. There were women. Warren was handsome, charming, professionally successful, socially skilled. He moved through rooms the way certain men do when they have learned exactly how to be what a room wants them to be. But here is the thing. Here is the thing that Dr. Patricia Owens helped me understand in that quiet office over 6 months of careful, patient questions. While I was focused on Eleanor, while all of my attention and energy and emotional resources were being consumed by the friction of that relationship, I was not watching my husband. Not closely, not the way I would have watched him if I hadn't been so busy surviving his mother. And Warren, I understand now, understood that perfectly. The calls he got that I wasn't part of, the trips he took for work. Real estate development requires travel, of course it does. No one questions that. The weekends away, the late nights that extended later as the years went on. The way he sometimes looked at me, not with love, with something else. Assessment, calculation, the kind.
Before I continue, I need you to stay with me. What I'm about to tell you is the part that changed everything. The part I have spent years deciding whether to share. And I'm sharing it because I believe someone watching this needs to know that what I found in that safe is not a movie. It is not fiction. It happened. It is real, and it is still happening to people in the world right now. Leave a comment. Tell me you're here. Tell me where you're watching from. I need to know I'm not alone in this room right now either. Eleanor's funeral was on Wednesday. Small. Warren handled the arrangements, handled the guests, stood at the front of the room with that composed grief that looked appropriate and exactly right, and made everyone touch his arm and tell him how strong he was. I stood beside him and felt the specific unreality of knowing something about a person that rewrites the grammar of every sentence you have ever shared with them. He didn't know what she had told me. I was certain of that. Eleanor had been careful her whole life. She had kept one secret from him through decades of proximity and observation and living under his awareness. She had kept it until the very end. I didn't know what to do with what I knew. I didn't have the words for it yet. I didn't have a shape for it. So I did what I had always done under pressure, since I was a quiet child at the edge of family gatherings, watching and waiting and noticing. I said nothing. I moved through the days. I let him believe everything was the same. And then, 3 days after the funeral, on a Saturday evening, Warren told me he needed to go back to Chattanooga. Something about the estate, about the house, about sorting through Eleanor's paperwork. He would be back Sunday night. He kissed me on the forehead and left at 4 in the afternoon. I watched his car disappear around the corner. And then I went upstairs, to the bedroom, to the corner she had described, the east corner, near the window where the afternoon light hit a certain way, and Warren had always placed a large upholstered chair that I had always found oddly specific, not aesthetic, specific, strategic. I moved the chair. The floorboard beneath it was slightly different from the ones around it, almost imperceptibly, the kind of thing you would only notice if you were looking for it. I used a flathead screwdriver from the kitchen junk drawer, and the board came up, and underneath it was a steel panel with a combination lock. I sat back on my heels. I had not thought about the combination. I had been so focused on whether the safe existed, whether Eleanor was lucid, whether this was real. I hadn't thought about what happened if it was locked. And then I thought about Warren, about what I knew about Warren, about the way he operated, the way his mind organized things, the way he used the same password logic across everything, because he was careful in large ways and careless in small ones. I tried his father's birth year. It didn't open. I tried his father's death year. The lock clicked. The safe was not large, maybe the size of a shoebox, recessed into a space below the floorboards. Inside were 3 things: a burner phone, turned off, its battery dead, a small, black, unmarked USB drive, and a manila folder. I took out the folder first. It was thick, heavier than it looked, the kind of folder that has been handled and rehandled over a long period of time, the edges soft from use. I opened it on the floor in front of me. The first thing I saw was a photograph. A woman, dark hair, cut to the shoulder, light eyes, gray or green, hard to tell in the photograph, an oval face with high cheekbones, mid-30s maybe, smiling at the camera with the open, uncomplicated smile of someone who feels safe. Below the photograph was a newspaper clipping. Knoxville woman missing. Family pleads for information. The woman's name was Carla Simmons. She had disappeared in November 7 years earlier. She had last been seen leaving a restaurant in downtown Knoxville. Her car was found 2 miles away, keys in the ignition, phone on the seat. She had never been found. I turned to the next page. Another photograph. Another woman. Different face, but the same type. Dark hair, light eyes, oval face, mid-30s. Another clipping. Chattanooga woman's disappearance remains unsolved. Detective asks for public tips. I turned another page. And another. And another. There were 11 photographs in that folder. 11 women. All dark hair, all light eyes, all oval faces, all approximately my age at the time of their disappearance, all from Tennessee or the surrounding states, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia. All missing, none found. The clippings spanned 12 years. The earliest was dated 4 years before Warren and I met. I was sitting on the floor of my bedroom, and my hands were no longer shaking because I had gone somewhere past shaking. I had gone somewhere very quiet and very cold, the way you go somewhere when your brain is processing information that it cannot fit into the filing system of your existing reality. I looked at the photographs again, all of them, one by one, and I understood what Eleanor had been unable to say in words. They looked like me. Every single one of them looked like me. I don't know how long I was on that floor. Time had stopped working the way it normally does. I became aware of a sound downstairs, the particular sound of a key in the front door lock, the door opening, the particular rhythm of Warren's footsteps crossing the entryway. I knew his footsteps the way you know the footsteps of someone you have lived with for 10 years, down to the weight he puts on the right foot slightly more than the left. He was not supposed to be home until Sunday. The footsteps were on the stairs. I did not move. I could not move. I was still on the floor with the folder in my hands, and the safe open in the floor, beneath me, and the chair pushed aside, and everything, every single thing, plainly visible. The bedroom door opened. His footsteps stopped. I could feel him taking it in. I could feel him taking in the scene. The chair moved, the board lifted, the safe open, the folder in my hands, me on the floor looking up at him. His face did something I had never seen it do in 10 years of marriage. It went completely blank. Not shocked, not the open, undone blankness of someone caught by surprise. A deliberate one, a controlled one, a managed one. And then he said, in that familiar voice, that warm, even, reasonable voice that had reassured me 1,000 times and charmed 100 rooms, here's what I need you to understand about the next 90 seconds.
I had studied psychology. I had spent a career understanding human behavior, pattern recognition, the architecture of how people reveal themselves under pressure. I had spent 10 years living with a man who was a masterpiece of controlled presentation. And in that moment, on that floor, with that folder in my hands, and those 11 faces looking up at me, something in me became extraordinarily calm. Not peaceful, not brave, not movie heroic, just calm. The kind of calm that is actually the absence of every unnecessary thing. The kind of calm that arrives when you have nothing left to lose, and therefore nothing left to manage. He took a step toward me. I said, "Don't." He stopped, because Warren had always been responsive to certainty, and for the first time in 10 years, I was not asking or softening or qualifying. I was simply certain. "How long have you been home?" he said.
Long enough, I said. Rebecca. His voice was doing the thing it did, the reasonable thing, the warm thing. What you're thinking, I'm not thinking anything, I said. I'm looking. There's a difference. I stood up, slowly, without taking my eyes off him. I had my phone in my cardigan pocket. I had put it there automatically when I came upstairs, the way I always did, one of those automatic habits that you don't think about. My thumb was already on the emergency call function. 3 years ago, I had set up an emergency contact on my phone, my brother Marcus, with a one-button SOS that would send my GPS location. I had set it up after reading an article about personal safety and forgotten about it consciously, but apparently not unconsciously. I pressed it. "Rebecca," he said again, "let me explain. The women in this folder," I said. My voice was very level. "Who are they?" He looked at me for a long time. "My mother had a lot of fears. She was not well for a very long time. You know that." "The women," I said again. "Research," he said, "from a project years ago. You're reading this wrong." He took another step. "Warren, Marcus knows where I am." He stopped. And in the stopping, in the calculation I could see moving behind those familiar eyes, I saw it. For the first time, without any layer between us, I saw what Eleanor had seen for decades, what she had been born into, grown up watching, tried her whole life to warn me away from. Underneath the charm and the warmth and the attentiveness and the perfectly remembered jasmine tea, something that did not care about me at all. I walked toward the door. He didn't move. I walked down the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door, across the yard, and I got into my car. I drove to my brother Marcus's house, 45 minutes away. I never went back. I called the police from Marcus's house that night, not the local department. I called the FBI tip line. I had done enough reading in my career to know that if this was what I thought it was, if these missing women were connected, and the connection ran through Warren, this was not a local matter. I told them what I had found. I gave them the address. I gave him Warren's full name. I told them about Eleanor's words. I told them everything. What happened next was not quick. Investigations are not quick. There are warrants and procedures and chains of evidence and jurisdictions, and the machinery of it moved in ways I was not always made aware of, and sometimes I could not follow. But it moved. They found the safe. They found the folder. They recovered data from the USB drive. The burner phone's records, even with the battery dead, were recoverable through the carrier with the appropriate legal orders. I cannot tell you everything they found, because some of it remains part of an ongoing legal process. What I can tell you is what became public, what was reported in the news over the months that followed, what I read in articles on my phone, sitting in Marcus's guest room in the dark, trying to absorb a reality that kept being larger than I was ready for. Warren had been investigated before, briefly, tangentially, in connection with one of the disappearances in the folder,
a woman named Diane Rourke who went missing in Asheville, North Carolina, 6 years before we met. He had been a person of interest for 48 hours and then cleared when an alibi was verified. The investigation moved on. He had met at least 6 of the women in the folder through professional contexts, real estate events, charity galas, networking functions. The world he moved through smoothly and warmly. The world that loved him. The investigation is still, as of when I am recording this, ongoing. I am not going to give you an ending that hasn't happened yet. I am not going to tell you that justice is complete, because it isn't. These things take time. They take more time than they should. The women in that folder and their families have waited years, and they are still waiting. And that is a reality I carry every day. What I can tell you is that Warren Harmon is no longer a free man. And that is where I will leave that part of the story. I want to talk about Eleanor. I want to talk about her because I think she deserves to be seen clearly, not as a villain, not as a hero, as a human being who was handed an impossible situation and who tried in the only way she could find to do something about it. She had grown up watching Gerald Harmon. She had lived inside the reality of Gerald Harmon for 31 years. She understood in her body, in the deepest architecture of her experience, what that man was. And she had watched her son grow up in that house, had watched him study Gerald the way children study their parents, had watched certain things take root. She could not go to the police, not about Warren, not about suspicions, because what did she have, really, in those early years? A mother's fear, a pattern she recognized from the inside, things that were not evidence in any courtroom. She could not tell me directly. She had tried, in her way. You can still leave. You can still leave. But she knew that if she told me the whole truth, if Warren found out, she would lose all access. He would cut her off. And she believed, I think, that proximity was the only protection she could offer. That as long as she was present, as long as she was involved, some check was maintained. And so she did what she could. She made my life difficult. She made herself an obstacle. She tried to make the friction great enough that I would choose to leave on my own before anything could happen. She spent 10 years trying to save me in the language she knew, which was not a language I could hear. And in the end, at the very end, when she had nothing left to lose and nothing left to protect, she found the words. She found them just in time. I have thought about Eleanor Harmon more times than I can count in the years since this. I have sat with anger at her, real anger for the 10 years of subtle cruelty, for the ways she made me smaller without explaining why. That anger is legitimate, and I have felt it fully. And I have sat with something else, something that took longer to name. Gratitude. Strange, complicated, grief-laced gratitude for the woman who spent a decade trying to save my life in ways I couldn't see, who found the words when it mattered, who held my hand at the end with everything she had left and made sure I knew. She was not a good mother-in-law. She may have been one of the people who saved my life. Both things are true. I lived in Marcus's guest room for 4 months, not because I had nowhere else to go, but because I cannot explain this fully, except to say that I needed to be somewhere where someone who had known me my whole life could see me every day, where someone could confirm in the simple language of daily proximity that I was still here, still real, still me. I started seeing Dr. Patricia Owens in month 2, twice a week. She was 50-something, calm, with the particular quality that the best therapists have, of being completely present without ever making the room feel crowded by their presence. She asked me once about 6 weeks in, "When you found the folder, in that moment, on the floor, what did you feel?" I thought about it for a long time. Nothing, and then everything. "Nothing first," she said. "Tell me about the nothing." It was like, I stopped, tried again. You know how when you've been carrying something for a very long time, something heavy, and you've carried it so long that you've stopped noticing the weight, and then someone points at it, and suddenly you feel how heavy it actually is. It was like that, but in reverse, like something I'd been carrying dropped away, and the absence of it was so sudden I couldn't feel anything else yet. Dr. Owens nodded.
What was the something? She asked. And I understood, in the way you understand things in a therapist's office that you have known somewhere for a long time but hadn't let yourself look at directly. The something was uncertainty, that low-grade, constant, invisible uncertainty that had lived in me for years. The sense that something was not quite right, but I could never locate it, couldn't name it, couldn't point at it and say, there, that is the thing. That background hum of wrongness that I had learned to explain away and accommodate and eventually stop hearing. It was gone, because now I knew what it was. And knowing what something is, even when what it is terrible, is less heavy than not knowing. The not knowing is the thing that wears you down. I won't walk you through every step of the rebuild, not because it wasn't important, but because healing is not a story with clean acts and satisfying turns. It's slower than that. It's more repetitive. It doubles back on itself. There are Tuesday mornings that feel like progress and Thursday afternoons that feel like nothing has moved at all. What I will tell you is this. I went back to work, changed organizations, fresh context felt necessary, and joined a research institute focused on behavioral psychology and specifically on coercive control. Not as a response to what had happened, or not only that, because I had always been drawn to this work, and now I understood why on a level I hadn't before. I moved into an apartment in Knoxville, first floor, good locks, a neighborhood I had chosen myself for reasons I trusted myself to identify. I learned to cook things I actually liked, not things that accommodated someone else's preferences. I sound almost lighthearted saying that, but I want to be serious. The freedom to make a Tuesday dinner for yourself based entirely on what you feel like eating is something I did not know I had missed until I had it back. I started running again, not a half marathon this time, just evening runs through the neighborhood, quiet and regular, the kind that don't need to be an achievement, just a body moving through space, just evidence of itself. I have dated since, carefully, with a clarity about what I'm looking for and what I'm not that took a long time to develop and that I am protective of. I am not interested in sharing this platform with anyone specific. That is mine, private. But I want to say that I am not closed, that the chapter that ended did not close a door. It clarified what the door is for. I am 39 years old as I record this. I have built a life that is genuinely, authentically mine. Not perfect, not without hard days, but mine. What I want you to know. The lesson beneath the story. There are things I need to say before I close this, things I have thought about carefully because I know this story is going to reach people who are inside their own versions of it. Maybe not this extreme, maybe more extreme, but inside something. The first thing is this. The most dangerous people are not the ones who show you something frightening immediately. The ones who show you something frightening immediately are the ones you can see. The ones who are truly dangerous are the ones who are warm and attentive and perfectly calibrated to what you need, who make you feel chosen and safe, who are beloved by everyone around them. Because the people around them will become your doubt when your instinct tries to speak. And instinct is already quiet enough without being shouted down from every direction. Trust your instinct, even when you can't explain it, even when no one around you sees what you see, even when the person in question is charming and good and loved. Trust the thing in your body that says something is not right. That thing is not paranoia. That thing is information. The second thing, Eleanor did not do what she did correctly. I am not holding her up as a model. The way she tried to save me caused real harm.
It cost me 10 years of unnecessary pain and nearly cost me my ability to trust people who actually wanted good things for me. If you are in a situation where you know something that someone else needs to know, find a way to tell them directly. Find a way to get them help directly. There are resources, there are hotlines, there are ways to put information in someone's hands without a decade of coded interference. Tell people what you know, directly. It matters. The third thing, and this is the one I most want you to hear if you are sitting somewhere right now in a relationship that makes you feel small, that makes you apologize for existing, that makes you perform a diminished version of yourself just to keep the peace. You are not paranoid. You are not too sensitive. You are not imagining it. Something that makes you feel like you are less than you are is not love. Something that requires you to become smaller to survive it is not a relationship worth surviving. And I know leaving is not simple. I know leaving is complicated and frightening and socially painful and financially difficult and socially painful. And I am not standing here telling you it's easy. I am telling you it is possible. And I am telling you that the life on the other side is real, that you are not going to fall apart without it, that you are going to discover what you are actually made of, and what you are made of is going to astonish you. You were always enough. You were always more than enough. You just forgot, or someone helped you forget. Remember. There is a woman I think about. Her name was Carla Simmons. She had dark hair cut to the shoulder and light eyes, and a smile in her photograph that was open and uncomplicated, the smile of someone who felt safe. She disappeared on a Tuesday in November, 11 years ago. She was 34 years old. I did not know Carla Simmons. I will never know Carla Simmons. But I looked at her photograph on the floor of my bedroom on a Saturday night, and I recognized something. Not her face only, something behind her face. A woman who had trusted the wrong person completely, who had no Eleanor, who had no brother with a guest room, who had no Dr. Patricia Owens or Dana flying in from Atlanta, who had no one who knew what was happening until it was too late. I think about her when the work is hard, when a case at the Institute is difficult, when I'm tired and the gravity of it is heavy. I think about her and I keep going. This story is for Eleanor Herman, who spent 10 years whispering a warning in a language I couldn't hear, and found the words at the end. And it is for Carla, and for the other 10 women in that folder, and for every woman whose name never made a newspaper at all. I see you. I am still here. And so, if you are hearing this, so are you. My name is Rebecca Herman, and I survived. If this story reached something in you, share it. Someone in your life needs to hear it. You may not know who. Share it anyway. Leave me a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your own story. Or tell me you're okay, or just tell me you're here. I read everything. Thank you for staying with me tonight.